All right.
All right. Go live on Facebook. Share page image. I think we might be live. Just double check.
I don't see it.
Don't see it? Let's see.
Mm-mm.
Is it live? Can you?
Let's see. I don't think so. Well, let me double check. I'm not the work for a tech company, but I don't know if I'm a tech person. Let me see. No, it's not live.
Okay.
Not when I go to the page.
I think we're going live now. All right. I think we are streaming live on Facebook.
Hi.
Is that a
Looks
yes?
like it. Yeah.
Amazing. Hello. Hello,
Hi.
everyone. Thanks for your patience as we sorted out technology. Thank you for joining us for Black on Both Sides today with Black Public Relations Society of LA. I am your host for this conversation, Marissa Wallace. I lead strategic alliances for BPRS, and I am very excited to present this conversation to you all. And also introduce our first guest, Simone Ashley White, VP of Business Development and Client Services at Blavity, Inc. So before I sort of kick off for the conversation, I just want to sort of preface everything with when we initially came up with this concept for this conversation, a few weeks ago, and we locked in Simone for this conversation. The world, looked a little bit differently, felt a little bit differently. We were battling sort of one major kind of like crisis for our community, that being COVID-19 and the pandemic and how it's been affecting our community. Obviously, the landscape has shifted. Not that COVID-19 has gone away, it's still very much prevalent, still very much a threat and affecting our community. But we, of course, are seeing the sort of reaction and fallout from the George Floyd situation and the protests that have followed. And so I am really, really honored to have this conversation around partnership and community with you today on the backdrop of these recent events, because I feel like it's very, very important and much more meaningful now. So first, with all that said, I want to ask you simply, like, how are you doing? How are you?
Whew, that is a really heavy question. First, I'm really excited. Thank you, Marissa, for making this space. The last few days have been incredibly challenging. I am doing okay, but definitely still, got some pretty raw feelings. And, given that I work at a company that is always on the front lines when it comes to Black issues, there's a certain responsibility I think that all of us have that make this time even a little bit more challenging. But thanks for asking. I'm doing all right. I believe that I am equipped with all of the support I need to keep going. So that I am blessed,
Yep.
How about you? How are you? How are Black people? How y'all doing out there?
That's the question. That's a question for everyone tuned in. How are you all doing? For one, I will say, feel free to comment and reply. I will say, similar to you, I'm probably a bit all over the place in my emotions right now. Still very raw, still very extreme, on extreme on the spectrum so far, but most of all, I'm inspired. I feel inspired by how our community has mobilized into action quickly. Like no questions asked. We were out there. We're outside. We're
outside. Yeah.
We are making our voices heard, and doing it alongside our allies, and doing it the best way that we know how. And I'm hopeful that the change that we are demanding will happen. So
yeah, it seems like people in the comments are feeling the same way, right? So I see uncertain, frustrated, exhausted. It's tough. I think that we are all kind of sharing in that collective pain, but then also, to your point, that collective inspiration to move and mobilize and organize. So I feel like we've got a tough road ahead, but we're in a good place. At least we're engaged, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Right. So I do want to kick off a little bit with more about you, so that the people know you a little bit more. I'm gonna actually share my screen if this technology works for us. Can you all see that?
Looks like it. Yes, we can.
Amazing. Can you still see me?
Yes.
If not, that's okay. No one needs to see me.
We can see.
So I just want to get into your bio a little bit, if possible. So Simone Ashley White.
Who am I? Who am I? What am I? What am I doing here? I don't know what my bio says, but I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about myself.
Tell us about the people can read the screen. But yeah, feel free to tell us a little bit about your background prior to Blavity, and then jump into your role at Blavity.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start. I went to Howard University. I graduated in 2008 with a focus on really figuring out like how I can find the intersection between business and journalism. I got my degree in journalism. I was like, I'm going to be Oprah. I'm going to interview people and make them cry and share their stories. Then I started to learn more about what that path actually looks like. And what it looked like was like, oh no, I'm not gonna make enough money doing that. I need to figure out a different route. And so I was introduced to sort of the back end business side of media. First through radio. So I started in radio, moved to New York after college, Then went into TV, worked for CBS television stations for a while. And basically my job was to work with advertisers, partners, to figure out how to best leverage whatever market they were trying to serve at that time. I did that for a few years, then went to the CW, and I realized like I liked the function of what I was doing, but it actually didn't serve the kind of purpose that I wanted to serve in my life. And so from there, I'm like, well, I'm in DC, I might as well look at politics. Like, let me figure out what that world is like, you know? And so I started working for Politico, which is a policy and political newsletter at the time, and now a huge multimedia company that gave me, kind of catapulted me into the digital world, right? So it was not TV, it wasn't radio. It's like everything was turning digital at that time. And I'm like, okay, this is exciting. I love it. But as I looked around the newsroom, I'm like, oh, wow, none of these people actually look like me, right? But I am working with people to bring in millions of dollars into this organization. And not only do they not look like me, but maybe the stories aren't reflective of the stories that I know to be true, right? So at that time, I'm like, it might be time for me to look to do something else. We were coming, sort of the tail end of the last recession. My family had taken a huge impact. And I'm like, all right, I want to go back to school. I want to learn how I could better financially equip my community and myself to make it through tough times, but also to like actually promote generational wealth within the Black community. So I went and got my CFP. And then I'm like, all right, I actually don't want to sell financial products, because that's what it looked like everyone did at that point in that field. And so I was like, okay, I want to get back into media. I started looking around. At that time, I was really blessed to kind of save some money and had some leeway to just spend time figuring out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to kind of show up in the world. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, Blavity is looking for someone to join their business development team. And I was like, Blavity, like they have that dope IG page. Like, I know them. Like, there's a cute little Twitter page. Like, yes, that's cute. Like, that sounds new and fun and fresh. And my boss is probably watching, but I was like, I don't know, like, if they, like, let's see what's going on. So I interviewed and I was like, all right, cool. Like, what's the deal? And I came into this office space. It was super tight, small, but like, it had energy. And I'm like, okay, this is an alignment, right? Like I can use my skills that I've gained and figure out how to help build an organization that is literally designed to support Black communities. And the rest is history. So I've been with the company for a few years now, and we have made some tremendous feats and grown a crazy amount. And I feel incredibly blessed to be in a space, especially today, in days like today, right, where I can look around, or at least look through Zooms and see people that look like me, see people that are in alignment with my general values, and still do work that I love. So that's kind of where I am now.
Amazing. Okay.
Yeah.
I know how y'all feel about Howard.
Yeah, we're crazy. We're literally insane. I'm trying to like calm us down. Our alumni groups are popping right
now. So you touched on how you got to Blavity, which feels a little kismet, that you were sort of open to an opportunity and the opportunity came your way in the way that it did. Can you talk to us a little bit more, for those who aren't as familiar with Blavity, about the company, sort of like how it was founded, or more so the why it was founded, and a little bit about your structure, because there's a few different brands and platforms that you guys have under your banner.
Yeah, so I'll kick off with Blavity's media company. We founded in 2014 by Morgan Devon, Aaron, and Jeff, our co-founding team. I'll lead into the why. So July 2014, if you guys remember, August 2014 was when Ferguson was happening and Michael Brown protests were happening in Missouri. So at that point, it actually was literally one of the only platforms and one of the only digital spaces where people on the ground could actually have their stories be told on what was going on truly, right? And at that time, as you look at media, either the news was coming out 2-3 days later, or it wasn't being properly tracked and identified. And people on the ground were like, no, that's not what's going on, right? And so they had Blavity as a resource to say, hey, this is what's really happening. This is what's really going on here. And Blavity became a vessel essentially for, activists and creators and writers and entrepreneurs and people who oftentimes just didn't have a place where their voices were being heard or their stories were being told. And it just so happened to be, right around that same time in 2014 during the founding of the company. So that is the foundation really that we're building on. And over the years, we've now looked at opportunities to one, start with data and think about like, okay, well, who's actually in our audience and how can we better serve them? How can we make sure that they have the resources and tools that they need? At the time, Blavity was a lot of college students, right? Young creators, but lots of women too, right? So women who were like, hey girl, like I got my twist out, I'm out here, I'm living my life, I have a voice. And so then we started to create platforms specifically for groups within the larger Blavity ecosystem. So 2190, as you're familiar with, is our women's platform. Sorry, I'm getting text messages. Distracting.
Okay.
It's our women's platform.
It's a whole world still happening outside.
It's
of
a whole
conversation.
digital world. Yeah. Summit 21, which is our women's conference that we host in Atlanta every year, except this year, unfortunately. Afrotech. So Afrotech is our tech platform, really designed for entrepreneurs, small business owners as well, but D&I professionals. So the entire sort of tech ecosystem in a space where Black tech can live, in which it just didn't have before. Afrotech has a conference that happens in Oakland. It's very Black, and we love it. And then Travel Noir and Shadow Act, two other brands that we acquired along the way, which were already really fantastic brands in their own right, and focused really on travel and really showcasing and celebrating Black travel throughout the world. And then Shadow Act is a media and entertainment brand, right? So thinking through like who are the heroes of the world through film and television and documentaries and in front and behind the camera. So we share their stories quite a bit on Shadow Act. And so, yes, we've done a lot now. So we've kind of got these 4-5 different brands that we share video content, editorial content, social content. But the goal really is to focus on what are the resources and tools that people need that we can help amplify through our platforms.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing work and interesting timing on the backstory of when Blavity was founded in 2014 and sort of like the landscape that was happening around that with Mike Brown and Ferguson and sort of how we're having this conversation today in the wake of George Floyd. So just an interesting and unfortunate sort of cycle, but sort of important to note, I think, in this conversation around kind of partnership and community as well.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of really interesting things that have come up in the demands for where we are today. And a large part of it actually is organizations and companies that fund police, period, across the country. And that was a large part, I think, why some companies were targeted in Minneapolis. And now there becomes a larger question around, how do companies consider and think about how they show up during this time and how important it is actually to already have that ingrained in the DNA of your brand, so that you're not just popping up to save yourself, right? But that you actually are doing this work more consistently. So absolutely, I think partnership is more important now than it ever will be. And, partnership with companies like Blavity, other Black media companies, is going to be incredibly important as we move forward. Because at this point, it's like, we can choose to partner with you or not, you know, and how you show up is incredibly important. So
incredibly important. And I think a great lead into the sort of like next topic that I wanted to talk about is sort of your personal thoughts on the importance of Black-owned companies like Blavity, such as your own, and others, and the role they sort of play in telling our stories, Black stories, being very explicit when I say that, and reaching our community. Sort of like, what is the responsibility that you all feel, if any at all, in that?
it's a huge responsibility. Well, I'll answer the first question. I mean, the first part of the question is around, you know, the need for Black media and Black platforms and Black-owned companies. It is the only way, literally, that we will be able to develop wealth and provide job opportunities. I mean, it's incredible that we're able to provide jobs to other young Black people that can't get roles other places, and allows them to show up as their true self. I mean, part of it also is a little bit of a self-care act, you know, like being able to wake up every day and choose to work in a space where you know that you'll be held, but also where you can just do your work and do really, really, really damn good work, you know? And having that space allows you to do that, right? Having that space allows you to be truly at your best self, where you're not worried about microaggressions, you're not worried about having to have unnecessary conversations, you're not worried about racist issues at work. Like there are incredible benefits, I think, to building these types of companies. And then I think, you know, Blavity is still very much so a tech company. And so we do focus on what does it look like to build other types of tech companies with Black founders and Black employees that are reflective of us, right? And the things we care about, which is really a lot of the work that Afrotech does. So I guess to answer your first question, is like, it is the way. And I think that it also gives us a lot of economic power that we wouldn't have had otherwise, other than in sports and entertainment, right? And so building business, buying land, being owners is important.
Yeah.
I think the second thing, like around how do I feel about our role, is like, I mean, I was just on the call with our CEO, like, this is the role. I mean, if you look back in history, Black media is the vessel, because oftentimes people are not going to tell the stories honestly and truly. You know, people will be thugs and looters versus activists and, you know, peaceful protesters. So just in that language nuance, it's important for us to have a space where we can tell our story. And frankly, we have a lot of people that are not Black that read Blavity. Right. And so they also are digesting the content and changing their narrative and changing the way that they share the narrative as well. So we have to be in control of our stories. And that's, I think, the value of being here as well.
Love that. And definitely is the way, right? Partnering with Black media to tell our stories and tell our stories in the right way. Our looters and thugs language, definitely right on point. We're in control of our narrative, and we know what's happening on the ground, and we know our value, and we know our story. So we need to be in control of it and owning it. I wanna take a step back a little bit to a couple weeks ago when this conversation was more so around just the pandemic and how it's been affecting Black people in particular, our community dying at higher rates than other communities, mostly based off of economic issues and racial disparities. But I want to talk a little bit about sort of the fallout from the pandemic and how that may have affected Blavity. I know before you mentioned Afrotech and 2190 being experiences that you, 2190 Summit 21 being experiences that you manage, but with kind of events and large scale events not being able to take place anymore, what kind of, I guess, pivots or things have you all had to internally reassess or reimagine, and how have you been affected?
Yeah, so the great thing about it is that we started as a media company that was primarily digital, right? So experiential activations and events became kind of a secondary business for us and our, core. So it's been a challenge in that, like, yes, of course, we'd love to see, 10,000 Black people running around Oakland for Afrotech in November. But at the same time, it's been an opportunity for innovation, for us to say, okay, actually, let's get back to our roots, right? Let's start thinking about how do we work with our partners to create something new, a new space that doesn't exist, right? So we've been spending a lot of time there, and I can't take full credit for it. I'm mostly just the one who talks about it, but the team has been working tirelessly to literally build new products, build new platforms from scratch that help small businesses, that will help entrepreneurs who are struggling right now, that will help people from like the self-care and mental wellness angle. It's an opportunity for us to say, like, this is why we're here. This is why we exist, to make sure that we can help other people stand on our shoulders, use our platform to keep their companies alive. For us personally, like everyone else, it's been a little bit of a struggle, right? Figuring out like how we're going to move forward. What does the future look like? But the cool thing is that we're still a relatively small team, and we were able to pivot really fast, and make decisions really quickly, and start thinking like, okay, cool, you work on the event side of the business, like let's start with some virtual events. So we've been doing these amazing virtual events series, and summits that we'll do throughout the entire year. I think we got lucky because there's a lot of companies that do huge, large scale events that, didn't have a digital platform to lean on, or to fall back on. We were already still, reaching 60, 80 million people a month through our platform. So it's like, cool, like let's actually spend some time being innovative in that space versus, scrambling to try to make an event happen, right? It's like we just pivoted. And I think that is very much so just strong leadership. And I think that that in and of itself is what's going to keep Blavity as a resource for everyone else throughout COVID, that pandemic, through this other pandemic we're going through right now, through all the pandemics.
All of the pandemics.
We have to be there to be the vessel for everyone else. So
I want to talk a little bit about that's great to hear that you can just kind of fall back on your bread and butter in digital. That's how you started, just kind of like reverting back to that. Can you talk a bit about how do clients or partners normally, traditionally, work with you in the past, and sort of what are you hearing from partners today that may be different or maybe the same? I'm just interested in sort of like what you're seeing in the landscape from partnerships.
Yeah, so typically in a normal world, we work with people in a lot of different ways, but primarily on the digital side through influencer campaigns, social media campaigns, video content. And the goal really is to say, okay, cool, like tell me about your brand. Like, what is your goal? How are you looking to engage with the Black community? And then we use Blavity's voice to tell that story, right? So instead of saying like, oh, we're going to take your content with like lily white people on it, it's like, no, actually, let's create content that we know will work and resonate with the Blavity audience. Obviously, we run display ads and do programmatic across all of our sites. We also have a newsletter for every single platform that goes out every day. That is, I think a space where frankly most people miss, but people read our newsletter every day. They open it, they engage. It allows them to sort of be the smartest person in the room when they show up in the mornings. And so the newsletters are a space that we also partner with people. And then events when we can, right? Now it looks a little bit different. And so some brands, and we've had a summit conversation around this, really trying to understand how we can support companies as they're redeveloping their plan for multicultural audiences. So as you look at the landscape, everyone's kind of, cutting budgets or pausing or trying to figure out what makes the most sense, or, dealing with massive layoffs, right? So there's a sensitivity that we certainly have around that. And then there's some brands that are like, actually, we're ready to go. We want to be in front of this. We want to make sure that people know that we were here to support them through this crisis. And so, a lot of it is really like starting with a brainstorm and starting with, this is what we know we can do really well. Let's figure out how we can help you pivot your brand into these new conversations and have them in a way that's sensitive to what's going on with our audience, but still has you in alignments, right? So most brands, we talked about this in our last conversation, it's not about selling anymore, right? It's mostly about support. Like, how can you take it from a lens of support? So when people come out, they're like, oh yeah, that brand was there, right? Like, they were there through this. They supported me through grants, right? Like, or programs or resources or just general information. I think that it's important for brands to show up, and if they can, there's some huge organizations that are deciding to be really quiet during this time, and I think that's a misstep. I think that it is actually important for them to stand up, to be vocal, and to support people through COVID, and not to cut Black dollars. That's the other thing. It's like, when anything happens, and I'm going to talk about COVID specifically, sometimes they make the decision to cut multicultural budgets first. And the
that's a word. I'm going to sip my tea. I'm going to sip my tea on that.
Sip that tea, girl. And I think the benefit of being a media company is like, nah, like, we see you. We see that you didn't show up. We see that you're cutting your budgets for multicultural first. And, we see you cutting your D&I budgets. Like, we see you. We're paying attention. And so I think that's important right now.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
not saying I'm calling anybody out yet, but I am paying attention.
Everyone is paying attention. I think is key right now. We see you. I do want to ask you about your demographic. You said mostly traditionally when partners come to you, it's to reach the Blavity audience. Can you talk a little bit about the Blavity audience and sort of like who that is and your demographic a little bit more?
Yeah. So it differs across our brands, right? So Blavity News, which is, sort of our staple brand, reaches, anywhere between 4 to 5 million monthly uniques on our website, is usually the youngest, right? So 18 to 35. So these are going to be like college age students, young creators, folks who are like, I care about what's going on in my community and I have a voice and I want to talk about it, and they will talk about it. So Blavity News is probably the youngest. Across our other platforms, like Travel Noir skews a little bit older. So you might find, anywhere between 25 and up to 45-year-olds. So these are people who are like wanderlusters, or like, I have a job, but I can travel the world. I got a little bit of a coin, like I can, spend my time really like exploring. And it's a really interesting group of folks because they're oftentimes like, I'm not young anymore, but I still want to be out here. So that's the Travel Noir audience. Shadow Nats is a little bit similar to Blavity, but probably 25 to 34. Mostly, female, but about half and half female, male. But those are creators, right? Those are artists, those are actors, those are just directors, those are the Ava DuVernays of the world, right? Who are sitting in the Shadow Nat space. And then 2190 is also younger, so 20 to 34. So usually we would say millennials, right? But that is kind of spreading out, right? Like, I'm like, people call me a millennial and I'm like, I'm old, everything hurts. I don't feel young anymore, right? So we are looking at a little bit younger group all the way up to, the millennial plus, as I'm calling them.
Right.
That kind of sit in that audience. And then AfroTalk is a span, right? So it's everyone from like, I am in college and I am creating this new dope robot thing and I don't know what is it, to like the investors of the world who might be, in their 40s to 50s. So that from a demo age perspective, that's kind of like how things break down across all the brands.
Okay. And then what would you guesstimate or estimate when partners come to you, assuming that when partners come to Blavity and come to you for partnership, they're trying to tap into your audience, everyone that you just described right now. What do those partners look like? Are they normally us? Does it range? Sort of who comes to the table trying to reach our community most of the time, if you can sort of like estimate?
Yeah, interestingly enough, on the agency side, so when we're working with advertising agencies, typically they are non-Black, but they are managing multicultural agency budgets. That is usually what it looks like. So there is a piece of it that is around education, because another Black person may understand that there's a nuanced way in the way you want to speak to a young Black professional, right? Which is a little bit different than maybe how you would speak to a young Black creator, right? So there's nuances that, are important to note. And so part of our process and partnership and when we're having conversations is a lot of times around just educating the person that you're speaking to about why they're coming to you and the value, right? So that's one. And then I think that depends, right? So with our tech partners, they have done a pretty good job in that world of creating lots of roles that are specifically for diversity and inclusion. And so those are more like you're talking direct to the company and they've actually identified people. Sometimes sometimes they are also non-Black, which, I find interesting, but it happens. And yeah, that's one group. And then I think the last group of folks is when we're talking directly to like marketing managers who are like, actually, we're trying to reach everyone. And it really depends on the company, right? So some companies have already created sort of a multicultural, never just Black, multicultural media budget within, their brand teams at organizations. And, most times they get it, right? Because they're really clear on who their brand is. They're not talking on behalf of someone else. They really understand like what they were looking to do. And they come to Blavity to say, hey, this is what we're looking to do. Can you do it? Usually the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever, and you can be as candid as you'd like to be, have you ever run into any situations where you've had to say no to a partner? We can't do that, out of like being comfortable or not being comfortable with what the ask is and what they're trying to relate to our community.
Absolutely. We have probably, 4 or 5 companies that we've, decided that maybe it wasn't smart for us to partner. Either they were directly harming the Black community, or they were so unclear about where they stood that it didn't make sense for us to like risk our brand or risk our company or even put our readers and followers at risk for like a company that we were just not in alignment with. So if the answer is yes, and I think that it's important for us to continue to lead with that kind of integrity. And we are willing to have a conversation. I think it's important to, as I mentioned earlier around education, sometimes it's like, you need to understand how people view your brand, right? And the many, 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 many steps that you have to take in order to be in a good place with this community. And it's not just going to be throwing money or ads in their face, right? That's not going to be the thing that's going to work. So oftentimes it is about taking a step back and having a really frank, honest conversation with not just the people that approach us, but also with their leadership, right? And the people who are running the organizations. We're like, great, can we talk to your CEO, right? Or like, great, can we talk to the head of this department so we can have a real honest conversation with them about how they plan on changing some of the issues that they might have within the Black community.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you all aren't afraid to kind of put your foot down or draw a line or make that ask, right? If we are responsible for our community, if we're responsible for each other, sometimes you have to have those uncomfortable conversations, because that's the only way that we can have change. And that's the only way that these brands and companies can really understand where they fall in our community. If they don't hear it from us, where else are they going to hear it from? So
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, it's I get it's tough for them too. You know, sometimes it's like the team is like, I'm just trying to do my job, right? And I'm like, I get that. I hear you. I'm trying to do the same, right? And a large part of my job is not just in partnerships and figuring out how to help monetize the company, but a large part of it also is making sure that at the end of the day, we're doing what's best for our audience, and we're choosing the right types of content to feed them.
Yep. Yep. I did want to ask you, what would you say are the sort of needs, or what do you kind of like need partners to have figured out in advance before they come to you?
Their budget.
Oh, budgets. How much money do you have? Right into it.
No, but seriously, I mean, I think that the thing is like, you know, it gets kind of tiring to be, it's like, look, you're going to other brands with other huge budgets, and then you're like, okay, well, let's give this little piece of baby chunk over to the Blavity group, right? They'll take that. At the end of the day, like we're a business, and it's important for us to talk to companies that value what we're bringing to the table. Like we're literally talking about reaching millions of culture creators that drive culture every single day. They could drive your brand into the ground, or they can celebrate your brand, right? And so I think that like it's important for people to come to the table and say, hey, we see value in this. And part of that also is around putting a dollar amount around it that makes sense. And is not, it's serious to us, right? Yeah. And I think that people need to realize that. So I think that that's definitely one. The other piece too is like, again, being clear about your brand identity. So a lot of times, and not every brand has this, and so sometimes they do come to us to have to help navigate exactly how they want to like approach their multicultural strategy. And so we're willing to kind of do that work with them. But the biggest thing is like, if you have a brand identity, be clear on how that aligns with people of color and Black people, right? Like, how do you want to show up in Black communities? I would say those are the two things. But yeah, budget, like come to the table, you know, like that's important. It's like you guys are multi-trillion-dollar organizations. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah, I think that's important. An important point, because what we do know, being in the space, to your point, is that multicultural budgets, D&I budgets, are often a very small fraction of an overall sort of like company's marketing budget. And so how do you, I guess, when, you know, you are approached, are you all flexible with working with partners, understanding that, no, I really do only have 50 cents to make this happen, like, but it's really important what can
yeah.
And I'm just speaking as a multicultural professional myself, and not saying that I've ever come to you with that.
I'm gonna say, Marissa, you always come correct. Let's be clear for the audience out there.
But understanding, you know, there's different scaled clients and budget sizes that you're working with, and knowing that at the end of the day, we do want to get a good campaign and product in front of our community, and we do want to be the ones in control of it. How do you work with different budgets?
We are flexible, and I think actually we've built products that can be flexible for a lot of different types of partners. And one of the reasons why we do that is because we value small businesses as well, right? So it's important for them to be able to leverage Blavity just as much as a huge, you know, multi-trillion-dollar organization. But with that being said, I would say it's always about, like, that's when it comes down to actual partnership, like true, like having the conversation and being honest about, okay, here's what I actually have. What can you do? Like, what can we do with this? And we, I think, have done a very good job on our side of the business to understand our cost, and really track like our margins really closely. And so that's important for us, I think, to say, hey, like, this is what I can do and this is what I can't do, and here's why, right? And it's not just some arbitrary reason out of nowhere. It's like, actually, there's a real reason. It's because to shoot from a drone for, and create a movie, it's expensive. And, here's the line item, sort of create an event with thousands of people, like that costs, right? And so I think we're at a place as a business where we've done a very good job of managing, tracking, and sort of organizing the business side of Blavity, so that when we're having partnership conversations, we can come to the table with things that we know will work, but still have a conversation about being flexible around budget. And it's tough because we know what we're coming up against, potentially, I guess, other partners that are other companies that don't do that, right? So they might be willing to do it. You have 50 cents. They might like, well, we'll do it for 25. Mm-hmm. And we're like, yeah, that's great. And then we're like, well, are y'all really paying attention to like how that's costing your business? That's a whole other thing. But we're still in startup world, and it's important for us to make sure that we are, really paying attention to how we're spending, and what partnership looks like, and what kind of partners make sense. Like, not every type of partner makes sense for us either.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think, like you said, in true kind of collaboration and partnership form, let's be honest with each other about, like, this is what I'm hoping I can do. This is how much money I have to do it. What can we figure out from there? And I think that would help create the most successful sort of like partnership. So I know that you said, you need people to be clear on budgets when they approach Blavity. You need to be clear. They need to have an understanding of sort of like their own brand identity, and like sort of like where they fit in the market within our community, where they stand. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts around counseling clients on giving back as a part of their sort of multicultural strategy and outreach? I personally, in the professional space that I work in, it's a major component of what I counsel my clients on, including some sort of community give back donation, or, you know what I mean, but having friends that go back to the community that you're outreaching, not just getting your product sold to us. So sort of like, what are your thoughts, and sort of where does give back sort of like fit in the counsel that you give your partners?
That's an interesting question. We have worked, primarily when we talk about giving back, it oftentimes is something that we're leading, right? So, and we'll engage them, right? So and maybe the question is, hey, we're creating a community stage at Afrotech that is specifically around giving, anywhere from 15 to 20% of all of our proceeds back to the Oakland community. Do you want to be a part of that conversation? Do you want to show up there, right? I think, or scholarships, right? Or things that are really about like putting dollars back into the Black community. So instead of like sponsoring us, like actually give us that money so we can create a scenario or a situation for giving back to other people. And that's usually the way that we approach it, because we know that we can control that. That's probably what we've done most. We have had people that have come to us and they're like, can you help counsel us through this? Or how do we show up correctly? And we'll have those conversations one-off, but I can't say that we fully take responsibility for it, right? To me, I'm like, hire someone, hire Marissa, like she'll come in, hire somebody, inside your organization who understands. We are a media company. We're not, exactly a consulting firm, right? And so we don't really take that stance, I think, but in conversations and in partnership with, different brands that we worked with over years, we are happy to have a conversation about it. We're happy to give feedback, right? Where it's like, hey, like, feel free to send me your plan. Like, I'll read it. I'll give you feedback on it. I'll give you some insight on what I think you can change or what will be more impactful. So yeah, those are sort of the ways that we approach it. It's not necessarily a one-to-one basis all the time with everyone. But we've created enough platforms and enough spaces, even in the nonprofit space, where we invite brands to be a part of that.
Yeah, that's great. Can you talk a little bit of, and you touched on it a little bit earlier when you said we would have loved to have people running around Oakland in November. Can you talk a little bit about, for those who don't know, the sort of shift in Afrotech and the location and sort of like why you all made that shift? I think that kind of plays into the conversation we're having right now.
Oh, from San Francisco. Oh, I'm feeling so radical right now. I'm like, ooh, let me be careful with my words. But a safe space on the internet that can go back any moment. Yeah, so originally for the first few years we were based in San Francisco. And it was a pretty good experience. I mean, our goal was really to say, like, there are Black people in tech, thousands and thousands and thousands of them. And we wanted to sort of take over San Francisco in that way, right? We want our presence to be known in a space that maybe oftentimes we weren't as welcome. And as we grew, right, so for historical purposes, we went from 500 to I think 1,500 to 5,000 to 10,000. And so that jump from 5 to 10,000 was really challenging in San Francisco. And also 1 year while we were in San Francisco, there were protests, and the protests were around, treating people fairly and giving them fair wages. Even in the hotels that we were actually hosting a lot of events and people were staying. And so there was just a lot of things happening where we realized we actually can't really stand for, any injustice, and we aren't going to participate in it. And so we had to cancel some things that year in the hotels that were having the protests. And then as we were like, hey, we're going to become a 15,000 person event. Hey, City of San Francisco, like, let's talk about what that looks like and how you guys can help us and what venues we want, et cetera, et cetera. And we very quickly realized that they were not as willing to work with us as we would have liked. And it's like, okay, cool. The city of Oakland is Black, and it's a community that looks like us. We're spending millions of dollars through people flying here, staying in these hotels, eating in these restaurants, millions of dollars for our organization alone. We could put those dollars into a city that reflects our audience, right? That looks like us, Black-owned businesses, a Black-owned, not Black-owned city, but a city that is primarily of color. And so that was the reason why we moved to Oakland. It was a huge risk. I mean, most of our tech partners were based in San Francisco. We were unsure of whether they would follow us to Oakland. It was like, are we sure we want to do this? And we did it, and it was one of the best decisions I think we could have made. Obviously, the infrastructure in Oakland wasn't really ready for us, right? They were like, oh, wait, what? Like, we're like, yeah, we're bringing a lot of people. Y'all need to get ready. And we worked with the city a lot, and I think there's more that we can do. But certainly think that Oakland and making sure that we're staying true to our values and what's important is core to our business. And so that is why we moved to Oakland. We've circulated those dollars through those businesses and continuing throughout the year to continue to manage our relationships with them, help with some of the nonprofits there, got all types of coalitions and groups and things like that happening. So it's an opportunity for us to drive impact consistently throughout the years, right? And really, Afrotech will always kind of, I think, be a space that is able to help grow Oakland, right? And help grow visibility for the city, bring more money into the city, all the fun stuff. So that's why we're there. And unfortunately, we're not going to be having Afrotech conference in Oakland this year, which is kind of crappy. But yeah, excited for the future.
It's COVID-19. We understand the impact. So I want to ask you about sort of like, what do you have upcoming? I know that you said before that, sometimes there are kind of like opportunities that Blavity kind of builds on your own. Like say it's a kind of like community stage where you're benefiting a nonprofit partner or something. What opportunities do you guys have sort of like in the can right now that potential partners might be able to sign up for or get involved with?
Ooh, lots of fun stuff. So I love this question. So we are doing, like I mentioned, we're doing these virtual summits. The virtual summits are cool because they are, we can talk a lot of stuff, right? So we're talking about doing some stuff for Summit 21, specifically for women. We've had 2 existing conversations just that are industry specific, right? So talking to professionals that are in sort of the D&I space and multicultural media space. There's a lot of really cool stuff that people can partner with us on that are not events. And then we're looking for opportunities for existing organizations that are already doing stuff for us to amplify their message, right? It's like, what are you already doing that we can help push forward that is going to be valuable for our community? Like, let's partner in that way right now. And then, we got a few other things up our sleeve that haven't launched yet. You might know, but I'm not going to tell the world. That I think are going to be really like game changers for our industry, and I think help lead the charge for what the post-COVID world looks like, which we all know is going to be very much so digital. So I certainly think, like, keep your eyes out, follow Blavity Politics right now. It's popping, if you want to stay informed of what's going on in this space. Yeah. Lots of cool stuff coming.
I did get a question in. How can professional organizations, like say a Black Public Relations Society of LA, create sort of an alliance or partnership with Blavity?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is going to be through content. Like, and I mean, you guys are the professionals in the PR space. Like, as you all are getting information, like sharing it with us. That's probably the most important thing so that we can help each other amplify, any messages that are coming out of those groups. And then I think there's stuff that we just don't know. Like, we're nonstop just getting information, and it's a lot. So I think that there's, as we think about professional organizations that have access to these brand conversations early, or are really like, hey, this is news that people need to know. Like, send us the press releases, like send us all this stuff. I think that's the biggest piece for, as I think about like this organization specifically, that would be really valuable. And then other than that, I'm like, stay in touch. Like, just keep in touch. Like, we are really, really easy to access. Really, like, people are like, oh, no one answers the alias emails. I'm like, no, we literally are the easiest people to access in this country. So just like hit us up, you'll get a response. Like, we want to make sure that we are certainly thinking about partnership in lots of different ways from different angles.
Yeah. Love that. I don't know if there's any other questions in the comments at all that I'm missing. Feel free to flag them to me. What I did want to ask you a little bit more about is sort of, just more thoughts again on sort of your role or Blavity's role as a Black media company today and going forward. And you probably are having those internal conversations now, and probably don't have that to share yet, but sort of like, what can you all do to help, I guess, evoke some change for our people?
Yeah. It's funny. I thought we were doing that. I'm like, we've got this media company. We're like highlighting all the Black boy joy, but also, Blavity, I think we are always in the trenches. We're always sharing the stories about people that are, dying at the hands of police brutality that no one ever hears about, that never become a hashtag. We're sharing the stories about Black trans people that are being, you know, literally like attacked nonstop throughout this country. I think, you know, our role is to make sure that we are literally the space where all of that information is shared so that people know what to do. With that being said, there is a piece of that that's like, all right, we're happy to inform people, but shit, you know, like something's got to give. And so we are having incredible amount of conversation around how we can better partner with other organizations, the NAACPs of the world and the Black Lives Matter of the world and other organizations that are actually, you know, doing some of the on the ground work, or we hope so. And so making sure that we can also help facilitate those spaces where each of those organizations are sharing a cohesive message, et cetera. So I think that, you know, we're very much so a vessel because we have the reach. And so that's what we'll continue to be. But we certainly do realize that we're in a unique position where we can have access to people that maybe wouldn't be as easy to reach. So now is the time for us to kind of mobilize in that way. You know, what we're dealing with as a community is heartbreaking. But I also think that this is a time for opportunity. There's an amazing opportunity right now for us to truly drive change. And change looks like a lot of different things for different people. We realize that, but we can't let this energy die, you know, like it has to, we have to create our demands and get it. And we will. Yeah. So I encourage everyone to like take care of themselves mentally and emotionally and spiritually, whatever your beliefs are, because outside of COVID, which is still real, y'all, still happening, there is certainly a long road ahead of us. And it's going to be important that, particularly as Black people, that we're taking care of ourselves and that we're, you know, really like getting our armor together, and so to speak, so that we can really push through these next few months and years.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. I do want to ask you, how can the people, I know you mentioned you're very easy to get in touch with, how can people follow you personally across social media, and then how can people get in touch with you and Blavity for a potential partnership?
Yeah, so partnerships@blavity.com is the email that literally comes directly to me. Partnerships@blavity.com is the way to reach us if you're looking to do any kind of partnership. And then me personally, I'm Simone Ashley or Simone Ashley White on every social media platform. You can find me there.
Amazing, amazing. I'm just gonna do another screen share. Just want to recap what we just talked about a little bit more. So can you all see that? Can you see that, Simone?
I can see it.
Amazing. So just a couple of key, you're my eyes, really. So just a couple of key takeaways for those a part of Beepers, those interested in Beepers, and those interested just in this collective conversation around partnership that I want to make sure that we pull through here is that representation is super important when approaching partnerships, especially multicultural D&I partnerships. Be mindful of those who are at the table. Ideally, they reflect those from the community that you're trying to reach, right? Both sides of the table. So that's number one. Number two, impact. Community give back components have moved from sort of like a nice to have to sort of a must have, and I feel like I'll see that trend continue on as the weeks continue. And then also just flexibility. So approaching partnerships, and Simone touched on this earlier. You can have a vision for what it is that you want to achieve by approaching a Blavity or a Black media company. Just be flexible in sort of like the execution, right? Like Simone and her team might be like, that's not quite how you should say that. So be open to feedback. The more collaborative the partnership, the more successful the campaign, right? Like you're coming to a Blavity for their expertise and for their insight on how to talk to their consumer base. So just take heed of that and just be mindful. So representation of those at the table on both sides, impact, and flexibility to partnership, I think are some key takeaways from this conversation. Is there anything that you wanted to add to this for the people to remember?
No, I think this is it. I think this is spot on. I will just say that I'm glad, although it's been a tough few days, that we're having this conversation. I certainly think that, you know, partnership is going to be incredibly important. We have to talk to each other, especially any other like Black media professionals and PR professionals. We have to be having these conversations with each other, because if not, we're not connected and we're not moving forward in a cohesive manner. So I'm super excited that we kicked this off. I definitely am a little like exhausted from protest life. But thanks for y'all for just, you know, having me.
Thank you. Thank you for the work that you do day in and day out at Blavity and personally. And for having this conversation. I really hope those that are tuned in and tuning in really get the sentiment from this conversation. I know this was, you know, an hour in time, but I hope that the basis of what we're talking about in true community and partnership between our community extends beyond this conversation, and it becomes the normal, and it becomes sort of like a consistent thing that we're prioritizing in partnership. So I hope that, you know, everyone is taking care of yourselves, take care of yourselves, whatever that might look like during this time. And thank you for tuning in. If there are any other comments or things you want to add, feel free to always engage with Beepers on Facebook, on Instagram, wherever you follow us. And also follow Simone and Blavity on all of their channels. And thank you for the time today.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe. Bye. Are we still on?